Welcome to Autism ADHD TV with Holly. That's me, a neurodivergent therapist, mom, and passionate advocate for affirming approaches. Maybe you're a parent trying to support your neurodivergent child or teen, a therapist or educator wanting to learn more, or you're a neurodivergent person looking for strategies that truly honor who you are. Whatever brought you here, you're in the right place. We talk about the real stuff: emotional regulation, self-awareness, executive functioning, self-advocacy skills that build confidence, social connections that are authentic, and so much more. And hey, if you're looking for deeper learning, check the description notes below for information on my parent workshops and continuing education trainings for therapists. You're going to love it. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and give us a like so you never miss out. And if you find Autism ADHD TV helpful, please share it with someone, because together we can create more understanding about neurodiversity. Now let's get into it. Welcome, Devon Price, to the Autism ADHD Podcast.
Hi, Holly. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Let me introduce you really quick, even though I'm sure everyone knows you already. Devon Price, PhD, is a social psychologist, professor, author, and proud autistic person. He is the author of the book Unmasking for Life, which we're going to talk about today, and has written several books in the past, including Unmasking Autism, Laziness Does Not Exist, and Unlearning Shame. So thank you so much for all of your beautiful work. I really appreciate it. I certainly read Unmasking Autism, just like most everyone did. I think it's probably the number one book that I see on all the therapist Facebook groups of recommending that book, which is so beautiful. I'm very excited to see it. And today we're going to talk about how can parents support their neurodivergent child, and unmasking goes for ADHDers too. So we want to be including them in this group when we're talking. But to start us off, I want to read a little bit of your new book. Is that okay?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, it's so lovely. I think it summarizes it so well. Each one of us masks our disability a little bit differently. Some of us wear masks of compliance and agreeability to prevent ourselves from being seen as stubborn or difficult. Others become class clowns to hide how unmoored we feel in a social world governed by unspoken rules we cannot understand. Some masked autistics lean into their intellectual achievements or become compulsive people pleasers, hoping to earn acceptance by defining ourselves by the few socially approved skills we have. And some of us pull away from the other people entirely, slipping into a disassociated, extremely passive state because even our best attempts at fitting in have failed. Although each of these survival strategies presents in a different way, they are all motivated by the same underlying goal: to avoid detection and further ostracism, and to hide the reality of how deeply we are struggling, sometimes even from ourselves. Then going into how masked individuals experience more loneliness, more anxiety, more depression. That's what I see from my clients. This can escalate to self-harm, thinking of suicide, substance use, all of those things. You are shining a light on this important topic. I think any parent, any provider listening to this today is going to think, I don't want that for them. I don't want that for them. I don't want them to pretend they're someone they're not. Devon, you do such a beautiful job explaining the why. Because when you say survival, that's not being dramatic. It really is about survival.
Absolutely. It is. First of all, I think we need to take a step back sometimes when we see someone masking out of what we might say from the outside, what a parent or healthcare provider or teacher might say from the outside is, oh, you're just afraid of being rejected. You're afraid of social judgment, as if that's a light thing. That is survival. When we think about how humans have lived and how humans survive, we are a social species that has always relied on other people to take care of us. And so being ostracized is a life or death matter historically in people's lives, and our bodies still feel that. And we see it's still the reality today for neurodivergent people who get the message that they're not fitting in. The threat and the reality for many in our community is that you're going to end up on the street. You're not going to have a support system. You're not going to have relationships and people looking after you as you age. There's a really high unemployment rate for neurodivergent people. And that's for neurodivergent people for whom work is even a possibility in people's minds because they can speak and walk around and do certain tasks independently. A majority of us are never going to work a full-time job. Roughly 15% maybe, depending on the study you look at. Most of us are going to rely on other people to remember to get fed, to remember to get dressed and bathed, to have the motivation to keep our house manageably tidy in whatever way that looks like for us. We need other people. And so a lot of neurodivergent people reach for masking to try and not deal with this social ostracism that is a really serious thing. It's not just this anxiety that you can just get confident and overcome easily. It's a very real matter of survival and having resources in the
It
world.
is. Absolutely. And when you talk about resources, I don't think people think about that. This isn't something that, oh, I like that outfit, so I'm going to start dressing that way. Maybe I'll fit in. It's consuming, right? It is you aren't enough, you are wrong. And we know that neurodivergent kids and teens are much more likely to be criticized and corrected than other kids.
Absolutely. There's so much about how the world works that leans on getting just a little bit of social discretion in your favor, people giving you a chance because they feel good about you. So, to go with just a kid in the classroom kind of example, we know from lots of educational research that so much of how a kid progresses through school comes from the expectations that the teacher has for that child and whether they give that child another chance when they struggle, get frustrated, don't know the answer to the question. Are they going to push the kid and believe in them? Are they going to give them help? Or are they going to move on or be dismissive? And all of those things fall down a lot of the time on, does the teacher like you? Do they think you're a good kid? Do they think you have potential? Do they find you annoying? All of this subtle social stuff can make or break whether you get enough chances to succeed, to get the help you need to think of yourself as a capable person. And that same kind of dynamic plays out in when you get in trouble with a police officer, when you are applying for a job, when you're applying for government benefits, when you're trying to navigate the DMV for the first time and you don't know what's going on. You need people to give you a little leeway. And unfortunately, the first response that most people have to neurodivergent people is to think there's something off about us and not trust us, to think we're lying or being evasive or that we're weird or annoying or too much or not enough. All of this tiny stuff that is impossible to master perfectly. Like this task of being a likable enough human is just absolutely maddening. And again, it comes with all kinds of little subtle and also really large stakes throughout a person's life.
You're right. You're spending all this time in school. Are you likable? Are you weird, dramatic, blowing things out of proportion, too sensitive? All those things that people are called, and they're basically saying you're wrong. You're too much. When you start to hear that, you believe it, and it becomes your foundational story. So then I think you're desperately trying, what can I do so I'm not all these things that people are criticizing all the time? Of course you would. It makes sense. But then it chips away at your soul, right? Then
Yeah.
you're having to deal with that in every moment.
Yeah. If you're being told over and over again, you're too much, whether it's you're asking for too much, you're talking too much about this thing that we don't care about because we don't share your special interest, you're moving around too much, you're annoying, all of those messages. The only answer that you'll think intuitively there is to that is to become less, to speak up less, to consume less space, to ask for less help. and to talk less about the things you're passionate about, to feel less. And it really not only winnows down your understanding of who you are, but you lose the skills that most people have to develop to assert themselves in the world because you do have to speak up in some way. It doesn't even need to be verbally. You have to express what you're feeling and what you need in order to just exist as a person in the world. And for a lot of maskers, they think that means that's having no social skills, that asserting yourself is being rude or inappropriate. And so having good social skills means being super inhibited and polite and agreeable all the time. And you can't get very far with that. You're not going to have a life that's true to you, and you can end up in a lot of, frankly, downright abusive situations, even when it's taken to its extreme. Yeah.
Absolutely. Neurodivergent kids are more likely to be abused. They're more vulnerable. They're supposed to say yes and agree to everything. And then when they say something is bothering them, they're being dramatic or maybe not truthful. So it's this horrible situation that they're in. The parents see this shift and it's hard. It's going against society, the society you live in, especially if you're in the US. For parents who want to support their kids, they are going to come up against barriers. So, can we talk about that for a bit?
Yeah. So much of what we've talked about already is about the social conditions that make people mask. People don't just mask because they're ashamed of being autistic or ADHD or bipolar or whatever else. They don't just do it because they have social anxiety. People mask because they are oppressed and they are excluded and pushed to and expected to mask. And so, what I hear from a lot of parents is they want so desperately to be supportive. Many of them had these terrible experiences when they were young, and they want so badly to spare their kids from ever having to go through that and to be that kind of confident person who can name their needs, like you just described. And I think what I see in a lot of them is coming to terms with just how big this stuff is and how much it's going to touch their kids' lives and their life as their parent their whole lives. And it doesn't end with just imbuing confidence in your kid because the world is still the world and the world is still a really ableist place where you're going to get a ton of pushback. And I think that's where it gets the hardest for them in moving forward with this stuff because one, there's a big amount of grief that I think you and your kid, frankly, have to be able to sit with and talk about and have a space for acknowledging that there are going to be these moments where you see your kid being treated unfairly, where your kid is going to be just blowing you away with their self-advocacy skills, and somebody's not going to like that. Part of what makes self-advocacy is persisting in it even when somebody doesn't like your boundary or doesn't hearing you say no or hearing you say what you
Right.
want. So there's a lot of work that families often have to do together in getting comfortable with people sometimes disliking them or judging them. A lot of the parents that I've seen be the best advocates for their neurodivergent kids, they have to do this really complicated diplomatic work of fighting with certain people at the kids' school, but then also knowing when to pull back on the throttle a little so they're not burning bridges. It's this very political kind of act. I know parents who one of the terms of their kid's IEP is that the kid never has to interact with the school psychologist ever because the school psychologist is super ableist, bathed in ABA therapy, and does not treat the kid the way this parent wants to see their kid treated or the way the kid wants to be treated. And so they have to fight this real battle, and the school psychologist is not a fan of them, right? But they had to find some way to get other members of the team at the school on board with that as a boundary. So there's all of these difficult things that you really have to do in cultivating an environment where your kid is more free to unmask because masking is caused by all of this environmental pressure. And so one of the ways that we unmask is by putting ourselves into the environments where it's safe to be ourselves as much as possible. So that's surrounding yourself with other neurodivergent people, making sure your kids know other neurodivergent kids, know other kids with their special interests, pull them out of spaces where they are being mistreated to a really extreme degree and there's nothing you can do about it. And then, even if you do all that amazing stuff, and it's a lot of work, you can't protect your kid from ever encountering ableism. It is going to happen, and it's going to break your heart. And you can't expect yourself to never let that ever happen because that's impossible. So then you and your kid need to also have a space to say, I'm really sorry. I feel like I let you down. I wish I could protect you from this stuff, but I know I can't always. What are you feeling? Let's talk about it. Like, that is also something that most of us did not grow up with, right? Is a
Yep.
parent who could say, there are limits to what I can do and I'm struggling and I'm sorry. And being able to sit in the hardness of that moment together. So that alone can be a really beautiful thing. And that's a hard place to get to, but it's something that I'm seeing again more and more neurodivergent families getting to that place.
That was so powerful, like you said, because a lot of times kids aren't able to see the things that their parents are doing for them, whether it's meetings, whether it's calls, and all this stuff is happening in the background. And they think no one believes them or any of those things when their parent is doing all these things trying to make it work. There's something so lovely about a child knowing their parent is got their back, right? As far as the parent coming up against boundaries, there's also that family part, the extended family. They all have these expectations. You should be doing this, or you should make them do this. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting things that can happen here because neurodivergence runs in families. So typically, a lot of the conflict that we see play out in the family system is from people who have completely different experiences in the world of being somehow different, somehow other, but maybe they never knew it, or maybe their coping strategies for making sense of it reflect the era that they grew up in and all of the trauma and masking and coping strategies that were maybe a little flawed that they had to get there. So there's a lot of projection across generational lines that you see a lot of times in the kind of autistic or ADHD family nexus, where a lot of older adults will almost kind of resent younger generations for having freedoms that they didn't have. It's really hard for them to process, oh, you can just wear whatever you're comfortable in. Like, you're allowed to do that. You're allowed to say no to a hug. Because if you're telling grandma, oh, our kids say no to hugs, our kids are in control of what happens to their bodies, she, as a woman from a very different generation, maybe never had that freedom. And what did that mean for her? What experiences did that lead to for her, just as an example? And how might that mean that she has a lot of complicated feelings when then she gets told, our grandkids don't hug unless you ask them and they give consent? So there's all kinds of complicated things playing out in the family. And one thing that I do encourage parents to do is to try and educate members of the family at their pace. Because wherever you're at, if you know your kid is autistic or ADHD or OCD or something else, and you know that maybe you're on that spectrum too, and you don't see that as a bad thing, that is just a neutral part of human diversity, you are in a really different place just from thinking about it that way from what the majority of people from older generations are at. So you have to really slowly introduce them to the idea of, here are examples of autistic people out in the world. Here's a video of them talking about their life. Here's a book. I know this is a new idea for you. I'm trying to help you understand because I'm hearing that you're frustrated and confused by the way our family works. And so if you'll just take some time to look at this one thing and then come back to me with questions, let's move through it. You can't really come in guns blazing and saying, I'm autistic, my kid's autistic, it's great, you're probably autistic too. You need to get with the program. It's just too much. And people don't usually respond to being told that you understand what's going on in their brain better than they
Right,
do.
right.
So you have to meet people where they're at. And that doesn't mean that you can't set boundaries. If somebody is really shaming you, shaming your kid, forcing your family to eat Thanksgiving dinner at the dinner table when that's just not how your family works, you still always have the freedom to say, this isn't working. My kid is on the verge of a meltdown. My kid's well being is my top priority. We're going to go home. I love you. Let's find out some other way to spend time, but this is not working. That is such a powerful tool in the family advocacy toolkit is hanging up the phone, packing up and leaving, starting a new tradition from a position of more equality and breaking out of those traditions that are things that you're just doing because you're expected to.
I was just thinking about comparison and how hard that is.
Yeah, I think that kind of conflict comes up a lot because our family members might have one set of values that they're taking as the standard. And it's usually the standard societal values of this world is a meritocracy. This world's totally fair. If you work hard, good things happen to you. And if you don't work hard, you get what you deserve. And the mark of a person's life is them getting lots of achievements, making money, having beautiful, accomplished children who are going to continue that legacy. And your home is beautiful and clean, and you're thin, and you meet all of these standards that are so punishing to so many people. And usually these assumptions all come together. It's not just, oh, your kid needs to mask. It's, oh, you need to set your kid up so that they can have a job. Like you're letting them get away with all these things. You're letting them be weak. And so then they won't finish school and they won't get a job and they won't make money. And that's usually also a family member who's shaming you for your weight because of their own baggage around that. Or all of these other values often come tangled up in each other because they're the values that society gives to us. So, one thing that I often encourage people in families where this is playing out is to take a step back and really clarify for yourself and your family unit, what are my actual values? Because I probably don't want my kid to be the star football player who's the most popular person in the world and is making millions of dollars. I want them to be happy. I want them to be themselves. I want them to be free to march to a different drum, all of those kinds of things. I want them to be a person who cares about others and shows that. If those are the things that matter to you, then there might be a big disjoint between you and what you were raised to value and what your family values. And so sometimes then you can just take a little bit of that mental distance so it isn't getting to you as much because it still feels like personal criticism, I think.
I am, yeah, personally taking a step back and have found it to be helpful. So that's excellent advice. Devon, like I said, I'm like such a fan. I'm glowing over here. If you're listening on audio, you're not seeing it, but believe me. Um, you're have so many great books, but the one we're talking about specifically is your newest book, Unmasking for Life. And I love it. You touch on all the different aspects. What does that look like? This feared future, right? It can be this fulfilling life that works for you. Thank you so much for this brilliant book. And I'm going to hold it up for those who are watching. Go get it. Go get it now. Jump on Amazon and get it now. I will make sure to have the link below so everyone can go down there and order it. Again, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having this conversation. There's so much to get into with this stuff. And this book really came from all of the questions that I got from readers and parents and teachers and supporters of autistic people after Unmasking Autism came out. So all I can do is thank people who have read it and responded to it because they said, okay, I'm trying to get with the program with this unmasking thing. What's next? And because there's a lot of challenges that come into being yourself in the world on a
There's so
practical
many
level.
challenges, and this is a beautiful way to follow up from Unmasking Autism. And so go get that too. Everybody, you got it. You really need both. But thank you again so much. And I hope you'll come on and see me again.
Yeah, it would be my pleasure.
Okay, take care. Bye bye. That's a wrap on today's episode. If you found this helpful, please consider hitting that like button and subscribe so you don't miss anything. And if you're thinking, oh, I know somebody who would really appreciate this episode, please send it on to them. Also, don't forget, go down to that description below because I have loaded it with free resources and information on my parent workshops and continuing education trainings for therapists. Everything you need to keep learning and growing. Thank you for being here, for caring, and for choosing
neurodiversity affirming approaches. I look forward to seeing you next time on Autism ADHD TV. Take care.
All content provided is protected under applicable copyright, patent, trademark, and other proprietary rights. All content is provided for informational and educational purposes only. No content is intended to be a substitute for professional medical or psychological diagnosis, advice, or treatment. Information provided does not create an agreement for service between Holly Blanc Moses Crossvine Clinical Group, the interviewee, Holly Blanc Moses LLC, and the recipient. Consult your physician regarding the applicability of any opinions or recommendations with respect to your symptoms or medical condition or the symptoms or medical condition of your family member. Children or adults who show signs of dangerous behavior toward themselves and/or others should be placed immediately under the care of a qualified professional.